Introduction to Planning Ski Tours. I'm Cathy O'Dowd. I've been a member of the Eagles for 15, 18 years, I'm not sure. I've been ski touring for about the same length of time, and I've been mountaineering for over 30 years. So I spent a lot of time in the mountains, and I was born in the map and compass generation and have watched kind of GPS and mapping develop over the course of my life in the mountains. The biggest thing I've ever been on skis is Mount Logan, highest peak in Canada, second highest in North America. And I did a fair amount of the sort of mapping for this one as well. This was an Eagle Ski Club expedition. What I'm about to talk to you about is one possible way of thinking about this. It's what I do. And it's not just for ski touring. I do it to find the routes into canyons and routes into alpine climbs and trail running and kayak trips. So the principle works for any kind of mapping, route planning. But nevertheless, it isn't some kind of gold standard. I'm not a guide. I don't teach this stuff for a living. This is just one possible way of going about it. And in fact, this presentation is adapted from one I put together for a little ski touring group I run in Andorra, which is where I live. And we get a lot of sparkly-eyed people who've never ski toured before and think it's going to be amazing. And I do various things to try and make sure that they have a better, safer time in the mountains. This is who I had in mind when I put this presentation together. Someone who up until now has followed a guide, an Eagle Ski Club leader, friends with more experience. So you've never been the person where the buck stopped. Now you want to take the lead, but you aren't sure how to do that safely. Where to start? You want to put together your own tour, and we're just talking about simple day tours at this point. We're not doing anything fancy. You ask people for some ideas, and what you get is some version of this. Oh, this one, that one, it's easy, it's straightforward, it'll be fine. Or, oh no, experts only, risky, gnarly, horrendous, tricky. What are you supposed to do with that? It's useless. I mean, who's an expert? Compared to the beginners standing on skis for the very first time this winter, we're all experts. You know, compared to the people in the World Cup skimo racing, we're all terrible. It doesn't really help. To make this work, we've got to find stuff that is more concrete, objective. So where does that take us? And in my opinion, there are basically 5 objective measures that matter in ski touring. The distance we're going to cover, the height we're going to climb, how quickly we're going to climb up that height, the aspect of the slopes we're on, the angle of the slopes we're on. So why do these matter? How do we measure them? And all of this is preparatory thinking, preparation for moving on a little bit later to plan your own tours. So, aspect, north, south, east, west. Why does it matter? Obviously, avalanche risk. We know that different aspects can have different avalanche risk. But it's other things as well. It's snow quality. If you're looking for powder, you may find it lurking on north or northwestern slopes. If you're trying to find spring snow, or you're trying to get the crust to soften, you may be looking for a due south slope. So the first thing to do whenever you are out on skis is pay attention. You have a compass on your phone. Yes, you could carry a dedicated compass, but you have a compass on your phone, and you're almost certainly carrying your phone. Pull your phone out and just have a look at which way you're facing. Now, this is a little easy for those of us who live in a ski touring area. So, I live in the mountains. My nearest ski touring is 20 minutes from the house. Actually, we've had so much snow. A few days ago, I could have toured out of my front door, but that's not common. So with my people, it's just every time you go out in these mountains, pull out your phone, look at the compass, and start to work out which are west face, which are south, which are north, which are east. And every time you're on snow and something changes, you are on crust, the angle, you moved around the mountain very slightly, and you suddenly came onto spring snow or softer snow. If you've got a moment, pull out your phone. What happened? Did you just go from southwest to due south? And due south gives you the softening. You find a little dash of powder. What happened? Did you suddenly drop onto a northern slope, a northwestern slope, perhaps? Pay attention whenever the snow changes to whether the aspect changes and to what the aspect is. All of this will allow you to understand what it means to look at a map and think about skiing southern versus northern slopes and so on. So that's aspect. Angle. Now, clearly angle matters in skiing. And the first one is, of course, avalanche risk. The really exciting turns, the steep turns, are also the optimum avalanche angle. And we need to think about that. But it's not just avalanche risk. If you're thinking about climbing up, how steep are you prepared to go? How steep can you go? And it's not just you. If you're planning the tour, you've got to think about the people who are coming with you. Can they kick turn? If they can't, and it's not just beginners who can't kick turn, it can be people with knee injuries or aching hips or whatever it is. Maybe you want to keep your tour under 25 degrees. Then if you're going to kick turn, what's your upper limit? And in general, it's probably somewhere between 35 to 38 degrees is where it just stops working to kick turn. Of course, that varies whether you're on powder or you're on icy conditions. If you're going to go above 35 degrees, now what are you going to do? Are you going to boot pack? Are people prepared to boot pack? Do they know how that works? Does that mean you should have boot crampons and an ice axe with you? There's some things to think about when you consider how steep you want to go on a tour. And that's just going up. Now we want to come down. Now we are not a cross-country ski club. We want it to be steep-ish. Steep enough to be fun, but can you ski it in control? Can the people who've come with you ski it in control? What are you going to do if they look at it and go like, hell no, I can't ski that? Is there an alternative? Is there another way to get them down that slope? Remembering that angle feels very different, whether it's a lovely firm base with 1 foot of powder on it, or whether it's just brick hard ice. Very different. And certainly at least where I am, the problem of cols with a very brief steep drop off, which may be too steep for your group to ski, even though the rest of the tour works. Or in the Pyrenees, the snow may be gone, and now how are you going to get down it? So just all the different things you might want to think about for angle. And the best thing to do, if you're not already very experienced, is to measure the angle, because most of us aren't actually terribly aware of what angle we can ski. And if we think in blue, red, black run terms, we may not know what those mean. And I don't think you should do the ski pole trick. It's not accurate enough. I think you should measure. I'll show you in a minute. But we do have this thing, the tour grading in the Eagle Ski Club. And this helps you to understand the difficulty of a tour that you might want to join. But it also sort of gives you an idea of of angles and difficulty. So we've got a beginner off-piste as being able to ski 20 to 25 degrees. Intermediate, S2, up to 30. S3, we're now expecting 35 degrees. Your speed is controlled. You can ski down a tight, narrow couloir or between tight trees. S4, looking good, controlled up to 40 degrees. And S5, you can get yourself down anything. But we want that to mean something to you. And the way to do it is to get used to measuring, not the ski poles. Either use your phone, just put one of a million different apps on your phone to measure angle, or there are various little gadgets for ski touring, nice Christmas stocking fillers, and just put them on the slope. Turn it into a game. Every time the slope angle goes steep, because that's where it gets challenging, either up or down, ask your group, quick, what do we think the angle is? Just run around, give me a number, and then somebody actually measures. And each time you do that, you are slowly calibrating your eye for what an angle is, what it looks like, and how you feel about being on it on skis. All of this will help you to understand and use mapping to prepare for tours. And then, of course, aspect and angle influence each other, both in terms of avalanche risk and in terms of snow conditions, because the sun gets higher in the sky, so the angle at which the sun and the slope interact changes through the season. So in Andorra, it gets incredibly hot in waves right through the winter. So we can have spring conditions in February, but we don't quite get spring snow. We get the crust softening, and it can be lovely skiing, but it's not quite the same texture and feel. And it's partly because the sun is much lower in the sky in February than it will be by the time we get to April. So that's aspect and angle. Distance. Distance isn't actually as important as it is in hiking in summer. In hiking, you have to take every single step. In skiing, you get half of it for free, generally, because you get to slide down half of it. You've only got to climb up half of it. That being said, you still need to pay attention. This is a skimo race that is run in Andorra every winter. And a friend of mine signed up for it 2 years ago and failed to read the small print, which says it's a 40-kilometer day. He nearly killed himself. So we care about distance, but not quite as much as we do in hiking, with one caveat. In thinking about planning your own tour, you do need to be careful about flat approaches, because these aren't free. If it's flat going in, it's flat coming back out again. And you are going to have to walk it or skin it or skate it. And that takes a lot more time than you might have thought. But in touring, we tend to be a little more interested in vertical gain. That's what takes effort, is getting ourselves up the mountainside. So this particular skimo race, 40 kilometers long, but also 3,000 vertical meters of climbing in that 40 kilometers. How much vertical gain you consider to be acceptable? There is no normal. So I give you the woman who holds the current uphill ski world record for 24 hours, 17,645 meters in 24 hours. So we're all very modest in comparison to that. Again, you can look at the tour grading on our website to get an idea of numbers. we tend to call the E is for effort. So easy, E1, 900 meters, normal, sort of 900 to 1200 vertical meters, strenuous up to 16, arduous 16 plus, and my personal unofficial grading, if I have to go over 2000 meters, it's hardcore. I'm not a schema racer. I'm not out there for 3000 meter races. Vertical gain, how many meters up you're going to climb on this tour. Then the next thing you need to think about in vertical gain is the speed at which you're going to climb these meters. Once again, there is no normal. There is no, this is the right number and everyone else is either too slow or too fast. This is the world record holder, Kilian Jornet, of course. 24-hour uphill ski record. He climbed at over 1,000 meters an hour for 24 hours. 23,800 meters in total. And of course, he had to ski back down. He still had to change, ski down, change, and then start skiing back up. So it just helps to put our speed in perspective. Eagle Ski Club tours. This is what we have on the website. A normal tour climbing at 250 meters an hour, a strenuous, and they tend to be talking about hut-to-hut tours rather than day touring, 300 plus meters an hour. The other set of numbers are my numbers for the people I tour with in Andorra. For us, basically an easy day is 300. My speed, if I'm out with my friends, is 400. And the people who are kind of amateur, like doing the schema racing, they're going at about 600. And it does matter. You know, if you thought you were setting out for a 300 day and the guy next door is doing 600, he's going twice as fast as you. And you do need a certain amount of homogeneity in a group. You can't, there are reasons it's difficult to say, oh, it's not a problem, we'll just bumble along at the pace of the slowest member. It is possible to be too slow. I once had a guy join, a little Andorra tour. He was doing 100 meters an hour. It was just utterly unfeasible. If you've got big speed differences in a group, the people in front will be bored and annoyed. The people at the back will be exhausted and demoralized. Nobody's happy. It's not a great fit. Because in ski touring, we tend to dress lightly when we're going uphill because it's hard work. And we assume we can keep moving to stay warm. It's difficult if there's a big difference in pace. And then there are quite possibly time constraints. You could well be on slopes where the avalanche risk rises substantially in the afternoon. You've got to cross them before noon. If you want to catch the spring snow window, this is late in the season where the morning, the snow is just ice hard. And then it softens in the sun. And say from about where I am, say 11 until 12:30, you just have the most amazing snow. And after 12:30, it starts to turn into sticky, hot mush. It's horrible. You want to be skiing down in the spring snow window. So you've got to know how fast you're going to climb for the distance you need to cover. So all of those are objective. It's not anybody's opinion. And using that objective information, we can look at descriptions of tours and go like, okay, the distance is this and the height gain is that. But it still has to mean something to you. It's no good telling somebody, okay, this tour is 20 kilometers. Are you up for that? And they go like, well, I don't know. Do you think I can do it? That doesn't help. So you need to know where you sit in comparison to the three numbers about distance, height, and speed. Now this too changes. It's going to change through the season. What you're doing in November is not what you're going to be doing by March, at least for those of us who can tour right through the winter. It will change year by year. Your glory days may turn out to have been before 2 years of COVID lockdown, before you had a kid, before you got a high-stress job. You may not be doing what you were doing 5 years ago when you last did big ski tours. Who knows? So you kind of need to keep an eye on these numbers because they change. I put a little note there about piste climbing speed. This applies more to my little group in Andorra, who will tell me, no, I can climb the piste in Aransal at 800 meters an hour. I'm like, yeah, dude, you can't kick turn. So it's very different climbing straight up a piste to doing kick turns on a steep, icy slope in the backcountry. Right, you want to know your numbers. How are you going to do this? So every time you tour, it's valuable information and you should be keeping track of it. In Andorra, people drive me crazy when they say, oh yeah, I love that tour that I did. And I'm interested, maybe I could do it. No, don't remember the name of the peak. No, I'm not sure what valley it was in. Well, that's such a wasted opportunity to learn something about the terrain and to have information to maybe go back and tour there on your own another time. So you want to be keeping track of all the opportunities that you get to tour. Building a map works well for those of us who've got a home ground. So the picture is just some of my GPS tracks crossing the border out of Andorra into Spain and France and back into Andorra, just one section. But even if you go to a different place each year, it's still worth keeping track. If you tour with a guide somewhere this year, make a note. If you go back in 3 years' time and go independently, it would be good to have that information. How do we do this? We don't have to use GPS, although this talk is mostly about GPS. It can be done on a map, in a notebook, but GPS is a lot more accurate. I think particularly distance, it's hard to get a really accurate sense of distance with trying to draw it in on the map afterwards. So, the easiest way to keep track of all of this is GPS tracking. And you can do it on a dedicated GPS device, although they're increasingly going out of fashion. You can do it on your phone. You can do it on a watch. I think those are the three basic ways that we now do this stuff. So if you're going to do that, we need to think about it because there are problems that need to be sorted out. It's always best to test this beforehand. Just go for a walk around the neighborhood and just try tracking. Get used to whatever you've chosen to use. So, on a phone, you've probably all got phones. Now, your phone will track in airplane mode. It will get a GPS signal in airplane mode, so that's okay. But tracking will eat through your battery, and your phone is already cold because you're ski touring. So careful with the battery. You're going to have to allow the app to do always on tracking. Not everyone is comfortable with that. You've got to decide which of a million different apps you're going to use to track. If you've got no idea and you want to try one to start, I suggest FatMap, but there are many. you need to check how accurate the app is. As I said, there are 1 million apps and a lot of them are dreadful. And then there's, I think the most important point, your phone is your #1 emergency device. Your phone is how you call in a rescue. Your phone is how you talk to rescuers. I'm not particularly comfortable with running down the battery of my phone for tracking. So your second option, a GPS unit. That being said, the GPS companies are moving away from their standalone units. I mean, most of us, if we have a GPS, have probably got Garmin. And Garmin has almost, not entirely, abandoned their standalone GPSs. And they're super focused on the smartwatch fitness market segment. But you could use a GPS and you don't have to buy the fancy ones. Right now, we're just talking about recording a track. We're not using it to navigate. You could buy yourself a really old Garmin eTrex, find one secondhand on eBay, and that'll work. Or on a watch. And I think at this point, most of us are probably tracking on watches. And it doesn't have to be the €700 Garmin Phoenix 6 Pro Solar. There are actually quite a lot of watches in this space. You could look for something more, a little more modest. Okay. So the next thing that happens is that people track on their watches, and that's it. They don't do anything with it. It just sits there on their watch. They don't even look at it when they've finished. That's not enough for what we need. You want to look at your tracks. You want to use these tracks to get a sense of those numbers we talked about, the distance, the vertical gain, the speed of the ascent, get a sense of what for you as an individual is an easy tour, a challenging tour, a soul-crushing tour. Then you want to kind of build a map of your ski tours. Now you're probably stuck on a platform. And by a platform, I mean you're using Garmin or Sunto or Strava, if you're using a watch, or whatever app you're using. And of course, they want to keep you on the platform. So the first place to start is to make sure you understand the platform you use. You want to be able to separate your ski tours out from anything else you track. You don't want a mishmash of biking and ski touring and running. So try and see if it's possible to create a clean map just of your ski tours. And then try and work out how to export your GPS tracks out of the platform. And the platforms don't want you to leave, but if you're persistent and you read the help manual, eventually there will be a way to export your GPS track. Occasionally, it's not possible if you're using the free version. You may find you have to go onto the paid version to be able to export your GPS track. And then a quick tip while we're here. Sometimes you take a GPS track out of a phone, or actually out of a watch, at least my watch does this, and you try and put it into a different mapping app, and it says that it's faulty. And there's like no obvious reason why. It just is. And this is the answer. I use this one, GPS Visualizer. You upload your GPS file, you output it as a GPS file, as GPX. It's the same thing. Who knows why this works? But in the process of uploading and re-downloading it, it almost always fixes whatever the problem was. So this is the sum up of the first half of this. which is kind of preparation for planning your own tours. Every time you tour, well, frankly, you can do this even when you're skiing in the resorts, whether you're with guides, skiing with a club, skiing with friends, look around, pay attention. Look at the slopes, look at the mountains, look at the angles, measure them, pull out a compass and check which way the slope is facing. Measure the angle of the slope, particularly at any time where it's making you feel very slightly anxious. What angle is that? You know, what is your anxious point? Always track. And get to know what is a good tour for you in terms of distance, speed, and vertical gain. Right, and before we go on to part 2, having rattled you through a whole lot of stuff, any questions, opinions, views, additions from anybody?
Just a comment, really. You said about the exporting GPS files from various devices can sometimes not work. The reason behind it is that the GPX format is an open format, actually based on an XML for those who are in the groove. But people like Garmin, the problem with the open format is there are optional extensions to it. So Garmin have their own set of extensions which they use certainly on their eTrex, and I think they're still using that. There's a particular problem if you tour in Austria and use the DAV maps of Austria and some of Italy, is that they have their own set of extensions, which certainly something like a Garmin can't unscramble. But the good news is that the basic, like height, location in terms of latitude and longitude and time is part of the fixed standard format. So there should be a way of exporting any format if you just want to analyze how fast you're going up, down and along.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And my experience has been, if you take one of those, which has got the extras of any particular format, and run it through, upload and download through something like GPS Visualizer, it basically strips it out, I assume, and gives you a more universally usable GPX file.
Yeah, you generally don't need all the extra gizmos that the manufacturers put in it to make it look more sexy, basically.
I think, Cathy, John Cairns, I think it might be the last trip we did before we all got locked down, but I think we'd worked it out on the map, and I can't remember, say it was something like 900 meters of ascent or something we were going to do. But one of the guys had his Garmin watch, and I mean, that recorded, you know, and he did exactly what we did, something like 1,200 meters. So it was amazing, you know, and he said, no, it is right, you know, because we looked at the map he downloaded it onto his phone. We looked at that, but, you know, it was a huge difference compared, you know, off his Garmin watch compared to what we thought it was going to be, you know, the old fashioned way, if you like. So it was quite nice. It was that way round, that we'd done more than we thought, really. So it does show you the difference between trying to do it on a map and recording it on a Garmin.
Well, actually, I think one of the interesting things about this is if you get down to it and think about what exactly distance is, it's much less definite than we assume. By which I mean, you know, what exactly is the GPS measuring? You know, how often is it measuring? Is it measuring every tiny little up and down as we just slide along on skis? You know, mostly downhill, but riding through dips and rises, for example. We think of that as downhill. The Garmin, the GPS is thinking of there's a little up gain every time we just smoothly swing up. Same with the kick turns we do. You know, how accurately are you measuring every meter of every zig and every zag or not? And I think one of the answers is not to get too hung up on exact numbers. Just because the watch gives you one number and some other guy's smartphone gives us a slightly different one, and the touring guidebook gives us a third number, it doesn't mean the two of them have failed and one has succeeded. it actually means that these numbers are fairly fuzzy around the edges. And again, I think the best thing to do is to know the equipment that you use and to understand kind of how your tours feel in relation to the numbers your equipment gives you.
With all the technology that's about, I mean, I'm in favour of watches, and the reason for that is that since I got COVID in March, I was encouraged by my physio to measure my pulse rate and recovery, and so I've been combining the watch technology with a pulse rate meter, which is linked to the watch, and that's certainly been very helpful. And I was just in fact in discussion with some clients yesterday who have done no ski touring at all, and they said, how fit do we need to be? And one parameter that I quoted them was, well, you know, to be able to go for an hour at a time for 3 hours at a pulse rate of around about 120, 130 will be a good thing. So in other words, where you referred to you know, fitness and how we feel, that's maybe just a way of quantifying what the demands are on our bodies as we're doing that kind of thing. And that's where obviously the phone and the GPS don't do that, but the watch system integrates all that data along with while you're climbing. And I've certainly found that helpful for myself to measure my rate of recovery.
That's a really good idea, and it's interesting. I think it shows that the next wave of skiers are basically going to come to us already very plugged into fitness. So measuring their pulse rate is something they think of as completely normal. Yeah. Whereas the previous generation would be like, what are we talking about? Why does this matter? So yes, I mean, there's plenty of other information to be got from these devices. But at this point, we're trying to just keep it relatively simple as an introduction. But once you dig into this, there's all sorts of stuff you can do. So all of that is just a setup for a way of going about finding and planning tours. Where are we going to start? Now, there's the traditional way, which was guidebooks and ski touring maps. And they're still out there, plenty of beautiful guidebooks being produced now, some very good maps. Obviously, it depends what country you're in. Wildly different quality of maps and books and availability variety of maps and books by country. There are also increasingly plenty of websites and apps that are offering you ski touring trails. And again, wide variation between country. So I'm not going into country by country. I want to look at some other ways of thinking about this. This is just a quick one for anyone who uses Strava. Strava's heat maps, and this is for premium users who are paying, are extraordinary. Have you ever tried looking at the Strava heat map for ski touring? This is the valley that's 20 minutes from my house. And these lines here, these are the runs through the trees. You can actually pick up where the tree lines are. You can pick up, this is the hugely popular, most commonly done ski tour. You know, these are the 1, 2, 3 places people cross the border into France out of these valleys. These are the slightly more popular, the slightly more difficult way up one of our highest peaks. And it's extraordinary what you can pick up off the Strava heat map. All the apps have heat maps, but I think Strava has by far the most data. So if you use Strava, go and have a look. Strava Premium. But what I'm actually interested in is that you do your own plan. You don't just follow a GPS track on an app or in a book. Because by doing your own planning, you can do it in Switzerland, where there's the most extraordinary amount of information, or you could do it in, I don't know, Albania, where there's almost no information, by using the same principles. I think we're probably past maps versus GPS fight. Those of us who've been in the Eagles for a while will remember Rob Collister, who was quite convinced that anybody who's a real man uses a map and a compass, and GPS is a sign of the fall of civilization. But I think most of us now use GPS. But there are some real advantages to GPS. The blue arrow of truth. Doesn't matter where you wish you were, or where you think you are, or where you hope you are. The blue dot, the blue arrow on your map says, no, actually you're here, and you're going to have to deal with it. Gives you a precise location, and on most mapping apps, it will actually, as you move the phone, it'll tell you which direction you're facing. Online maps offer a lot of layers of information, which you can work through without having to deal with a single paper map, which just has way too much information layered on it. Online maps update, which can be useful. And there's some good stuff to be done with satellite photography, particularly in terms of where I am tree skiing. Now, I'm not saying it's either or. I definitely back up with paper maps for more complex touring. But this is about GPS. I think people sometimes assume by GPS we mean what you do in the car. Plug in the GPS and you've got no idea where you're going. You just go where the bossy lady tells you to go and you turn up at your destination. That is not what I mean. We're not actually following a GPS navigation. We're simply using the GPS track as a piece of information, just like all the other information that you bring into planning a ski tour. So if you're going to do your own planning, you want to take the tracks of tours you've done already, put them into mapping software to build your own little map of where you've been, of tours. And now my suggestion is you take tracks of tours you've already done and use them to learn some of the key online mapping sources. Because it's much easier using a track of a place you've been in the real world to understand what can be fairly complex pieces of mapping software. And then having done that, once you've got your head around the software, you want to start putting other people's tracks into the software and having a look at them and deciding if that's an interesting tour for you. And eventually drawing your own tracks, places you'd like to go, and then taking that track with you into the field. So where do we get tracks from? There are so many places. It's a bit exhausting. Basically, there are two things that you're going to get. Some websites are open, by which I mean anybody can upload a track. So that will give you a large number of tracks of varying quality. And it's going to be up to you to source your way through all of that and find the good tracks. The other lot are curated. So someone or an organization has picked high quality ski tours and has checked the, we hope, the accuracy of the tracks. Which country uses what is a little bit historic. Spain uses, I'd go for Wikiloc, because Wikiloc was founded by Spanish guys. So that's big in the Pyrenees. The first big French GPS sharing site was Camp to Camp, which means that Camp to Camp has a huge amount of information. Italy, apparently they use Gulliver. Who knew? Some Italian guy told me. There are some now on FatMap, and we're going to look at FatMap. This is a curated selection from the Ekran. This relates to this. If you didn't watch Rob Benton's webinar on the Ekran, which I spelled wrong, we've got it up on YouTube. And he's curated a set of ski tours, beautifully done, available for free. Austria, Alpen, I can't pronounce that, Vereinen Active. Two big ones for Switzerland. And if you've got friends who tour in the same places as you, share your tracks with each other. Plenty of places to get tracks from, depends on what country you're in. That's a starting place to start. Okay, I actually want to show you how this works. And I'm going to show you in Wikiloc, because this is what I use because I tour in the Pyrenees mostly. Most of the time, you probably need premium, which means you need to pay 10 euros a year. You can't even buy a single map for 10 euros at this point. It's worth paying. So let us, right. This is Wikiloc, the website. And search for trails. I'm going to put in the valley 20 minutes from my house called Sorten. It offers me, yes, Andorra. Okay, Sorten parking. And, okay. I can, this is obviously satellite photography. I can swap that. These are, no, we'll stick with satellite photography. What maps you're offered depend on where you are in the world. Now, it's not terribly helpful to just know that a whole lot of ski tours leave from this car park. I want a way of looking at what we've got. So if they've found 300 trails coming out of Sorten car park, I can filter by different activities, but all of those are ski touring, so we're fine. Right, if I click show on map, zoom out a bit. Okay, show on map, show on map. Okay, now I'm beginning to get a sense of different possibilities going out from this car park. So this is one way of doing it. Let's get rid of those. A second way of doing it, which I like, is this, search by passing area. So let's suppose, where are we? I want to cross that col into France. And I want to know who has put a track in. So I need my circle to sit over the col I want to cross, search for trails passing here. Okay, then zoom back out. We've got that. That only goes up to the pass. Yeah, not quite what I wanted to do. Show on map. Well, it's pretty obvious what people normally do when they cross that pass, which is an interesting way of finding the popular tours, you know, if it's an area you don't know well. And then like, oh, look at the overachiever who went all the way out there. Like, okay, that's interesting. If we want to know more about the long tour, we click on his tour. And we've got a set of information. The distance, the height gain, technical difficulty, everyone has a different opinion. Max elevation, minimal elevation. He's put in some photographs, which was nice. Took him quite a long time, but that's hard to know. They may have gone fast, they may have gone slow, they might have had, you know, difficult snow. Interesting to know when he did it. He toured it in March. He's written a bunch of information. If this is in a language you don't speak, copy it, and go and paste it into Google Translate in Chrome. The English won't be perfect, but you understand ski touring. You'll be able to get it, what he's trying to say. And he's put some waypoints in, and some other people have done the track and given some opinions. Again, if you don't speak the language, copy and paste it into Google Translate. So, quite a lot to be got out of that. Oh yes, you can run the profile and see where the high point is. That's the pass, all the way down to there, long climb back up, second pass. Okay. And if I want to take this GPX trail, and either look at it in different mapping software or take it with me on my phone, well, I could put it on my watch, but that doesn't work for me. On my phone, download. I don't want it in the Wikiloc app on my phone. I don't like the app. I want a file into my own phone. Include the waypoints. Download. And that GPX file I've downloaded, I can send to my phone. I have Apple, so I would airdrop it to my phone. If you're on Android, you can just email it as an attachment, email it to yourself. So, any questions about any of that before I show you the next piece of mapping software?
Cathy, that one you just showed there, so does that, because it came up with Yosemite and things, does that work in other, would that work in France or, well, near France, but say Italy or something like that, or are you better doing a different one?
So there are two things. There's what you are used to using, comfortable with, fast, confident. And then there's what has got the most options in the area you're going to. So Wikiloc is a worldwide platform. It just happens to be most popular in Spain because it was Spanish in origin.
Right, yeah, okay.
But you're right. If I was touring in Italy, I'd probably start with Wikiloc because I know it. I'd have a look, and if I found some good stuff in Wikiloc, I'd probably stick with it. If I had a look and realized that the Italians just don't use Wikiloc, then I'd swap over to, say, Gulliver, which is the Italian one. But of course, I'm going to have to try and understand Gulliver, which is going to be slower. So, yeah, you kind of swap back and forth between your favorite mapping tools and then whatever is most popular in the country you're trying to travel to.
Thank you.
Andy.
So this is the reason I'm here, Cathy, because I'm sort of sitting in between Rob Collister and you in terms of the tech. You just mentioned that you can airdrop a GPX file to your phone. So let's say I did that because I'm in an Apple environment. Would that appear in? I mean, what do you do with the GPX file? Are you using a particular mapping software in the phone then? And if so, how does that GPX file present itself? Right.
So I airdrop it to the phone. Up on the phone comes a message to say file received. GPX file. It can be opened in the following programs.
Right.
So it will offer me. So, for example, it could be opened in White Risk. That's one that it offers me. If assuming Swiss Topo has an app, that would open it. Wikiloc would open it. Yeah. I use a mapping thing called Pocket Earth. It's actually much simpler, and I will show you a little bit later.
Okay.
When I talk about how we get these tracks onto our phones and use them in the field.
Okay. Cool. Good.
So,
I mean, I'm running about 3 or 4 different mapping apps, and so it'll just presumably then I'll say, oh, do you want to use it in X, Y, or Z? Is that what you're thinking? Okay, cool.
it will say, it will call up all your mapping apps, say, these are the apps that will open this file. Where would you like to put it?
Great. Okay.
It's very slick.
Thank you.
Andy and Cathy, if I just leap in there, I mean, I think both the Spanish government open data, so you can get all of their maps for free, essentially, online, and I think they'll take GPX files, as will the IGN Geo portal for France.
If you're talking about Ifigenie, sorry if we're going off on one here, Cathy, but
yeah.
Okay, good.
No, you're right. I think at this point, almost anybody who's offering their mapping online will probably allow you to import a GPX file into their mapping platform.
Sure.
So some of the stuff you just have to experiment. You don't always end up with the best solution. You end up with a solution that's good enough for you. You've learned it, you're comfortable with it, and now it's time to go and play outside.
Yeah, I mean, I went through this exercise when I went to Greenland a few years ago because I had GPX tracks, but it all felt really clunky. And from what you're saying to me, there was about 2 or 3 stages I had to go to get from the file from the computer to my phone, and what you're saying now, I think that phone technology has advanced so much more in the last 4 years that it just goes bing and it happens.
Yep, it's a lot less clunky. Now, like you, I've lived through. I remember when we had no GPS.
Yeah.
I've lived, and it continues to change.
Cool.
So
Thanks.
I want to introduce you to a second mapping platform, and it's called FatMap. And it's actually founded and run by one of ours. Misha is an Eagle Ski Club member, has been for years. He's toured with the club. He's been running FatMap for, 7 years now, 10 years, not sure. And he's actually going to be giving a webinar about it, the March webinar to the Eagle Ski Club, about the whole thing, how he founded it, why he runs it, running a startup, the technology behind the platform, where they hope to go with it. So if this interests you, I'm hoping that that's going to be an interesting webinar. So, FatMap. I'm not saying that I think FatMap is the best platform in the world. If you tour in Switzerland, you are going to be using Swiss Topo. I don't think anybody beats the Swiss for mapping. But of course, if you're touring in Albania, Swiss Topo doesn't help. But FatMap is worldwide. So there's something to be said for learning to use FatMap, because it'll take you almost anywhere. And then you can combine that with whatever is the dedicated one for Switzerland or Scotland or Austria or Norway, wherever you're going. Like everything, FatMap is best if you pay for it. It's 30 euros a year. It's still the price of 2 guidebooks. It's not that expensive. And once again, the best thing to do is to look at it. So this is FatMap. Once again, I'm going to put in my little valley of Sorten. And FatMap is fancy. Right, so just to quickly explain what we've got here. That has us pointing north. This would take us to a, from above, 2D version. I think FatMap works better in 3 dimensions. This, if you pop it, no, this one. We've got controls. So I'm interested in this valley. So I zoom into it because I know the valley, that's the car park. So now let's have a look at what mapping. this is obviously a satellite view, satellite photography. These are the different base maps. So they've done deals with various of the mapping companies. So you can actually get Swiss Topo on this. You can get OS maps for England. Where I am, the Pyrenees, I would look at both IGN Spain and IGN France. Because they give me slightly different views of Andorra. And here I get a sort of a traditional map laid over a 3D structure. But actually, I think a little more useful is to stay in satellite photography. And if those were base maps, it's to go over here and explore overlays. Okay. So, gradient. I don't like this. I find it difficult to understand what I'm looking at. So this is the one that's supposed to tell you what the angle is, but I actually find it easier to go out of gradient and go into avalanche. Because avalanche is done in 5-degree increments of the angles that interest us as skiers. And this is much easier to visualize. So all of this is under 25, gentle slopes, 25 to 30, 30 to 35 going up there. This is all a nice gentle valley, and then some steep slopes up here. So this, I think, is quite good for looking at angle. And of course, you can move around and you can zoom in and out. Like everything, it's a little easier to see what's going on if you bring a track in. So if I click on this little pencil, tell it we're doing ski touring, upload a track, and stop. Right. This is one of the reasons I think you should record tracks of tours you've done and use those tracks to learn the mapping software. Because it's much easier to look at this when in your head you go like, yeah, I remember skiing up there. I remember what that looked like. I know what that ridge was like. It helps you understand what you're looking at. Right, let's go back to layers. So that's avalanche or angle. Aspect. So most of this tour is done on south-facing slopes. So nice softening of the snow. But if we spin around slightly, another good piece of skiing, this is my local, 3-hour morning tour terrain. Up here, because it's nice and easy, and then come down this side. These are runs between trees. And so this is, there we go. Dark blue, northwest to full west facing. And we get powder here in between the trees, even when all of the orange stuff is sun crust. If we come back to the angle, you can see these are nice steep lines. Most of it is sitting between 30 and 40. So this is fun, steep skiing down through the trees. Okay, so angle, aspect. What else is interesting? Elevation. always go the wrong way. As you run the pointer, it'll give you the line. At least in Andorra, this is useful when they tell you the snow line is 1900, or because it's Andorra, it's rained to 2100, there's a rain crust, so the good snow is above 2100. So that helps you, but there's a better way of finding elevation, which I'll show you. Okay, flats, meh. I think this is one for people who insist on split boarding. These are the places you're going to get stuck on your split board. Less interest for skiers. Okay, what else? They offer webcams, if there are webcams in the region. Live snow is new. It doesn't seem to be that good in the Pyrenees, but those of you in the Alps, it might be interesting to see what you get with the live snow overlay. Custom terrain. That's quite interesting. So, custom terrain. There we go. That's what I want. Okay, and because I've inadvertently slightly changed the setting, FatMap is now offering me ski tours that other people have uploaded. That's why we suddenly have all these different blue lines up these valleys. But if I'm in Andorra, let's say we've got one of those days where we've got crust everywhere. And the only place that is softening is due south, something that happens for us. So I'm looking for due south slopes. I know that the snow line is quite high for us, say 1900. And I'm not feeling super brave. I don't want to go over 35. And now I'm looking for places I might be able to go. So this valley works, this whole side, that's due south. But I can simply move around my little country looking at different valleys and seeing where I can find due south slopes at the right sort of gradient. So a little more useful for people who live in a ski touring area, but this can be quite helpful. Same if you're trying to find the last of the powder. You know, turn this round. Look just for north and northwest slopes. And then move around and go, oh, that's interesting. Then have a look at maybe how steep that is. So you can do some quite fun stuff. With custom filters. So, any questions about any of that? Well, why do you think about that? Getting tracks into FatMap, the easiest is what I did, which is to save the track onto your computer and then upload it. You can link your Garmin, your Sunto, your Strava directly to FatMap. But then you end up with every track of everything you ever do, which seems to me to be a bit over the top, but it's a personal choice. You can also, if you want to track on your phone, you could try using the FatMap app for tracking. Right, I've shown you the base maps, I've shown you overlays, I've shown you custom filters. Right. let's get rid of this. Right. No. Right, so if you've got a track from somewhere else, you would bring it into something like FatMap. Because if you've taken somebody else's track, you do want to check that it's a sensible track. The responsibility lies with you to work this through. So let's settle for avalanche. We look at this track. This is following a road, so straightforward, although it's possibly threatened there. All of this is easy. So this is a short, easy tour. Always go the wrong way. And wrong way. This is interesting because by looking at the GPS tracks, this is 30 to 35. But if you wanted a tour that was safer than that, you could adapt this one, because if you look at it, you could go out here and you can stay under 30 just by cutting across there, skinning up there, say. And then if it's looking good, you could ski the steeper slope one at a time. And the advantage of having looked at this beforehand is when you get here, all of this is just one big white slope. And it's actually not particularly obvious, unless you're quite experienced, that this is over 30 and this is under 30. Until you're halfway up skinning this, you start to think, oosh, bugger, this feels steeper than I thought, and I'm not that comfortable. So by having done some preparation, you know that you can avoid this by going to the left. So anytime you use somebody else's GPS track, I'd bring it into something like this and just look through it and see that it makes sense. You're never going to follow it exactly. This is just a piece of information. You will make your own judgment based on what you see, based on what the group wants when you're in the field. Now that's a very easy tour. I'm just quickly going to pull in and off we go. So we're interested in this one, the light blue one. This is the highest mountain in Andorra, peak of Coma Pedrosa. And that's our longest couloir in Andorra. I think it's 900 vertical meters. It's just an illustration that you don't have to stick to easy slopes. We boot packed this. We took the skis off about here, 30 degrees, and we boot packed our way up through 40 degrees, basically, out like this, on what's a snow canal, up onto the summit, and then skiing down. You can see you're basically skiing down this canal between the two steep slopes. So you can come into steep terrain, absolutely. As long as the avalanche conditions allow and the ski skill of the group allows. Right, so that's just a look at what you can get out of this kind of software and how you can analyze a track that you've got from one of these many different websites. And then finally, not quite finally, but the other thing you can do with the mapping software is draw your own track. And I mostly use this for tree skiing. You know that feeling when you stand at the bottom and you look at a slope and you go like, yeah, there are a bunch of possible lines there. And then you get to the top and you're in the trees and you're like, I don't know where I am. I don't know where the lines have gone. You're just completely hemmed in. So drawing with satellite photography works quite well. So at this point, to show you this, I'm also going to answer Andy's question about how I carry tracks in the field. I use this. It's not fancy. And that's part of the reason I use it. A lot of the apps are so busy trying to be everything to everyone. They're too fancy, they're too busy, they've got too many features, they keep upgrading the features, and they're just confusing for me. Maybe I'm just simple of mind, but I like this map because it's very simple. I get offline topographic maps, not super detailed, but they're good enough. It's drawing on OpenStreetMap data. I can group tracks by sport, ski touring, alpine climbing, canyoning, trail running. I can hide the tracks of the sport I'm not interested in. I can hide individual tracks. I can make tracks different colors, which helps me to know to sort them. I can add notes to my tracks so that I can pull the track up on the phone and then I've got a set of little notes. If you're going to use a phone in the field, you do need to think about whether you can see it. Using glasses, using goggles, in bright sunlight. Those of us who are getting older and our eyesight isn't as good as it was, you know, there are problems with using phones, but you can get a lot out of them. So this is just a very quick little example. We had the huge snowfall, same as you guys up in the Alps, and high avalanche level. So this was a very safe, simple tour close to my house. I followed a snowshoe track along with half of Andorra all the way up to the summit. And most other people ski back down, which is boring. So I simply took my phone. This is what the map looks like, mapping app, Pocket Earth. It does give me direction. So that's my location. And the little arrow points the way I point the phone. So I use this to make sure that I'm facing down towards the hairpin of the road. I don't want to miss this. This is very thick forest. I know this from summer. I want the maximum run and I still want to catch the road. And just using that to make sure I was skiing the right way through trees, I got this really nice ski line. I ended up in the road there, having found that big open patch. But I then took this home and I put this track into the mapping apps. So let's have a look at that. Yeah. So that's what I've just been showing you. This blue line was my line down through the trees. And I sat here with a satellite photograph and thought, that's skiable. This isn't. This is mess. This is horrendous. If I could find this, that is skiable. And it looks like this is fairly open up here. And so what you do, if you're doing this in FatMap, you use this one. I'd have to cancel out of here. And you literally start drawing, click, 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 and it'll draw a line. And you can zoom right in to try and make your line come through the trees. And that's what I ended up with. I actually drew it in this one, Wikiloc, not in FatMap. This is the line I've drawn by sight, based on the satellite photograph. I take this, put it on my phone. So that's the track I skied 2 days before. Orange is what I've drawn and now put on my phone. And this second purple line is what I actually skied. So in the end, I found a better clearing slightly further right, which worked really well. This helped me drop off the road at the right place, even though it looked like it was all just trees. And this was almost perfect. And I got a great, extra piece of skiing. John's question, is there a way of distinguishing up and down? Yes. Generally. Actually, I'm not sure if there is in FatMap. The trouble is I know the terrain, so I know which way is going to be up. Certainly, if you're in Wikiloc, there is, because you run the little blue dot. So this was a down line. The blue dot stops at the top. I run it down the thing, and down the little blue dot goes. I think you'll find the same in FatMap somewhere. I never thought about it. So, yes, somebody's pointed out that Pocket Earth is an iOS app. Android has many, many, many apps. I'm sure there's some equivalent. My main point about this is simplicity. I actually like having a simpler mapping system. This is another quick use for this. So I wanted to do this tour in purple. It's quite long. We've positioned 2 cars, so it's fairly complicated. At this point, we've crossed into France, and there's a massive mountain barrier all the way along here. So having skied this, the crux of the climb back out of France to Andorra is here. And this is what we found. And this was pretty much at the limit of the equipment we had, a single touring axe. We're basically front pointing up this icy couloir. If that had gone wrong, if we couldn't have got through that, it's a long, long, long skin back to the first car. What is useful is to have taken some GPS tracks that show me the 2 coal crossings. Now, in this case, this is my own track because I've skied this before, but I could have taken someone else so that I would have on my phone escape lines. Much quicker to just boot pack up there and then ski down, and then hitchhike back to the car. So that's just another use for pulling GPS tracks onto your phone. GPX tracks onto your phone. Mike, why not use Pocket Earth Pro for the tracking? Because I don't want to track on my phone. It comes back to the question about what are you saving your phone battery for? If I just quickly have a look at the map and see where I am using this or using, they're going the wrong way. Looking for the little blue dot to, this does not use a lot of battery power. It's taken 30 seconds. If I'm tracking on Pocket Earth Pro, I am running through my battery. And my phone is my emergency device. I track on my watch, and I use my phone as a map. Right. Finishing up quickly. What have we got? These mapping apps like Pocket Earth or equivalents are based on OpenStreetMap data. OpenStreetMap is open source. And if you find something on an OpenStreetMap based map, which is wrong, you can fix it. You can become, it's reasonably easy, a collaborator, a contributor to OpenStreetMap. And if you find things where you've gone skiing or touring that are wrong, you go into edit, and you can edit. That does mean with OpenStreetMaps, the quality varies. Maybe in the Pyrenees, it's incredibly detailed because there are a lot of contributors. Maybe you end up in Albania and it's less detailed because fewer people contribute. But at least it's available to you in Albania, whereas, OS and Swiss Topo and so on are not. So just a thought about that. Finally, for complex terrain or a long tour, I would still have a paper map in the group. Ideally 1 to 25,000 to have enough detail for the paper map to be doing better than the phone maps. Of course, whether you can get them for any particular country, hugely variable. And then the other thing, for people who come into this and like, yeah, my phone and a smartwatch, I'm set. And yes, I spend the vast amount of my time day touring the Pyrenees, skiing by sight, phone, smartwatch, it works perfectly. But you do need to think about what you're going to do in really bad conditions. If it's a massive clusterfuck and you've got to get out, how is this going to work? Following your tracks doesn't work. A little bit of wind, a little bit of snow, your tracks are gone. So people go like, well, I'll backtrack. I've got these GPS tracks. I'll backtrack on the track. Right. Have you tried backtracking on your watch? That's really hard. Have you tried backtracking on your phone app? That may take some practice. These things have touch screens, potentially your watch, certainly your phone. Does your touch screen work if there's snow falling on the screen? Can you see your screen of your phone if you're wearing goggles in a whiteout? It can be very difficult. Can you use either your screen or the buttons of your watch if you're wearing gloves? There's no doubt that if we tour in good conditions, a lot of the time we just quickly pull our gloves off, do it with our fingers, it's nice and easy. But if this is your emergency navigation setup, you need to test this and you need to think about whether it's actually going to work in bad conditions. I have some experience of bad weather navigation, not a great deal, not compared to some people on the call. But I've always ended up taking a bearing off the GPS or off the phone. I can take bearings off the mapping app on the phone. And then two of us following the bearing using a normal compass. The sucker in front with the best eyesight has to ski off into the complete whiteout. And the person behind them is holding the compass and calling out instructions to keep them on the bearing. And then we do fairly short pitches, and each time we stop, we check where we are, we check the bearing is correct, or if we need to change the bearing, and then we ski the next pitch. I'm in no sense an expert in bad weather ski navigation, but for us good weather skiers, we do need to test this stuff. And better to practice in bad weather in your home ground where you know what's going on and the stakes are low, than to try and work this out in the middle of a real emergency situation. So, any questions on any of that before we wrap it up?
Just a comment, really. Speaking from experience, having sent probably at least 2, possibly 3 compasses back to Silver to get them magnetized. For goodness sake, don't put your compass in the same pocket as your phone, because it absolutely just switches. I thought it can't be down that way, and basically it just totally gone out 180 degrees on my compass. Obviously I had a spare, so that was okay, but you know, Silver will, if you send it back to them, they will remagnetize it and post it back to you free of charge. So, but better off not having to do that.
Yes, that's a great tip, as we carry more and more electronic stuff in all our pockets.
I think actually, Cathy, the same thing can apply to phones, certainly to my Samsung Android, that the compass recalibrates itself, or should I say uncalibrates itself on a fairly regular basis. So yeah, phones can be great, but the same sort of concern apply. I think that was probably Ken who mentioned that previous point, wasn't it? So you need to use your common sense more than you might think.
That's interesting. I don't think I've ever noticed my phone get the compass wrong. But yes, all of this gear, it's interesting because we do need to calibrate it. We need to look after it. We need to check the batteries. And we need to use our common sense. But we also need to, I think it goes both ways, because there's a kind of heuristic trap where you go like, no, I really want to be in the other valley. And I'm determined to tell myself that my phone is wrong and my compass is wrong and my map is wrong and I'm in this valley, and you aren't. You're where the GPS says you are, which is the valley you don't want to be in. So we need to use our common sense to make sure the equipment is working properly, but we also need to kind of accept the equipment is probably right unless you have a good reason to think it's wrong.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the one thing that GPS doesn't get wrong, unless the Russians are jamming the signal, is your location. I think direction's a bit more debatable, but absolutely agree that if it's got your latitude and longitude and converts that into whatever map reference system you're using, that's pretty dependable.
Partly for the benefit of people that are new to their sort of ski touring adventures, I'd like to enthuse about sort of traditional map and compass, and the importance of keeping skills current. Sort of some of the things you were saying at the end there. That I was skiing in mist last week, and I only used map and compass and altimeter during the ascent. And in the ascent, there's plenty of time to do that, so that there's nothing really lost. I did use my GPS in the descent because it can take, there's a time differential trying to do that manually, and also there's much more latitude in where you actually go when you're skiing down using a GPS, although I used the map and compass as well for that. But also navigating is good fun. So just to be using technology rather than first principles, I think we'd be missing out on a lot. I carry spare compass. I carry spare GPS batteries. Both of those are in my jacket. I rarely actually carry a smartphone, and if I do, it's in a Faraday bag. So I like a traditional GPS that will work in a hoolie with big mitts, etc. So it's maybe slightly old-fashioned, but you get plenty of blizzards up here. So proving it means that you can use it when you need to, and sometimes you do need to. I mean, even last week we're doing sort of stem turns on slope that you weren't sure whether you were moving or whether you weren't, and that's quite normal up here. You wouldn't do that in some of the terrain you'd be skiing on, Cathy, but it's all good fun. So that's my penny worth.
Well, I think you can take up Rob Collister's flag, Alan, and continue to fly a map and compass flag. I would say for those of us who enjoy tech is also fun. Working with these, all of these tools is fun.
I'd agree with you there. Sorry, Cathy. I'd agree with you there, Alan. With Cathy, in that, I was, very dyed-in-the-wool traditionalist, and I've been using the tech, and it's super interesting. But the people who are coming into the club now, me and you, Alan, we are really quite old school, and the people who are coming into the club and who are going to be taking the ski touring banner forward in the next 20 years, they're tech savvy, and that's the tools that they're working with. Just so I sympathize, or not I sympathize, that's the wrong word. I empathize with your position, but the fact is that we all come at it from different perspectives, and it's good to keep your eyes open to other. The reason I'm on this, I've learned a lot, just being here. It's been super interesting talking to Cathy. So thanks. I've learned some stuff today that I didn't know. I just wanted to pick up, Cathy, on your last slide. I think it's really important for people who are thinking about leading tours or not leading, that's the wrong word. That's a Freudian slip, who are organizing their own tours with friends. And you talked about, you've got on that slide, Cathy, about the mental load of being in charge. I would say just share the responsibility as much as you can. That's super important to have those discussions, and just as a what's the word, in addition to that, to emphasize that although we've talked about all the information that comes from the map and the GPS and all that stuff, that's then got to be correlated or compared to the capacities of your team, and it's really important to listen to listening for the capacities of the people that you're with, and recognize when those capacities are being exceeded. Just like being in the wrong valley, if you're in the right valley but your team can't climb out of it, but you hadn't realized that, then you could be as much as in shit as if you were lost.
Absolutely. I think with all of this planning, it's great, but judgment on the day overrides everything. Exactly. It overrides the plan, it overrides the GPS track, it overrides the mission. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Is there a case for having a dedicated GPS with buttons with you for the eventuality that the weather's very bad, or there's a risk of you flattening your phone battery because you've been using it too much? I'm off to Arctic Norway, so it's from that perspective that I'm asking the question, really.
I'd say yes. So when we went to Mount Logan and went to Mount Steele, both in the Yukon and Canada, we took the Garmin, whatever it's called, the GPS 64 or something. It's the one with the buttons.
Yeah.
Because we just couldn't imagine trying to use a touch screen, and we certainly couldn't manage to navigate on the phones at that point. You couldn't keep them charged and so on. So yes.
Yeah. Up until now, I've been Map and Compass Brigade, probably worse than Rob Collister, but never mind.
I'd wholeheartedly endorse Cathy's view there, Peter. I've done a lot in Arctic Norway. It's pretty savage. It's Scotland on steroids, and I know that's difficult for Alan to understand, but it makes Scotland look like Toy Town. And it is pretty savage. And having redundancy in the kit in those kinds of environments is super important. So you've got a map and compass, you've got a phone, you've got a GPS, you've got a watch, you've got all these things that if one piece of kit breaks down or two pieces of kit, you've still got something to haul you out of the brown and smelly. So yeah, I thoroughly endorse. And then, as Cathy's been emphasized, the usefulness of this evening for me has been to have the confidence or to think, oh, I know I've got sorts of GPX files all over the place. Like, oh, I could just put the GPX file into FatMap and I can have a look, or I could take a GPX which is on the computer somewhere and then transfer that into my phone or into the GPS unit, or it's just having the different kinds of technology talk to each other. That's what I've taken away from this evening, is to have. It's not that difficult, it's just giving me the confidence to think, oh, I should just try that, just see if I could. Oh, I can. How fantastic is that? So yeah, I just emphasize that having multiple platforms or tools or whatever and being versatile is really key to the whole thing.
Here's a little simple bit of versatility. Having a homemade stylus for your GPS. So it's very glove compliant.
Sounds good to me, Alan.
Yes, I do think we really do seem to be finding the standalone GPSs for the backcountry are not being, it's not that they're not being supported, they're not being prioritized. So I think Garmin is kind of just quietly allowing their field GPSs to sort of slowly fade, and that all of their development is going into watches, which is a bit sad. But I think to some extent we're going to have to follow the flow of technology, which is going to moving us towards phones and watches, and presumably at some point glasses. We'll live long enough to see that, but not yet.
Cathy, I think one of the advantages of handheld GPSs, let's call them, is certainly the Garmin e-Trexes and the like, is you can have a spare set of AA batteries in your pack and you can plug them in. Whereas with phones, that can be a much heavier option. And I don't know about backup batteries for watches. I don't know, do such things exist?
Well, both phones and watches can be just charged off battery bricks.
Yeah, for USB, exactly.
And the power in the battery bricks is sort of increasing exponentially year by year. So it's getting easier and easier to just say, I've got backup batteries for my phone. It's not a problem.
Thank you, Cathy.
Thank you, Cathy.
Thanks, Cathy.